we can. It's one pass, so I'll guess two passes. Yeah, two passes. There, right. That's what I wanted to have for a start. So okay, since people joined, so yeah, everybody, welcome to the webinar about how to write with Playwright. Part two. Part one has been about writing front-end tests. Now we're going to have a look at writing API tests using Playwright, and we're going to use TypeScript. Now, before I dive into that, a few words about myself. So my name is Piotr Naliwajko, and I've been working for Spyro for over 5 years now, and as a software tester for, what is it, 12 years now. Maybe I've mainly been dealing with test automation, both API and front-end sides, bit of performance tests, started off with C#, then moved to Java, and now I'm happily writing some tests in TypeScript, and that's something I wanted to share and show everybody how much fun it can be, basically. So that's, I guess it's for the introduction. So let's get to the better part of it. So start the presentation. Right. So okay. Right. So the agenda for this is, well, first I'll say a few words about using Playwright TypeScript, like why to use it, what are the benefits of using this for API tests compared to some other solutions. Then we'll have a quick few words about setting up the framework. That's going to be very quick because it's very similar to setting up a testing framework for front-end tests, and that's been in the previous webinar, so I just want to refresh your memory a bit with this. And then we'll get to the biggest part of this webinar. It's going to be live coding. So like you probably saw in the advertisement, it's going to be about sending in requests and handling responses. We're going to have a look at an example framework. This is basically the structure I personally like to use in my work, this framework structure. So yeah, it's proven. So I hope you'll also benefit from it. We'll have a bit of a look at test reporting and washing tests of different environments. And we're also going to have a talk at the end about focusing on a process, not just single endpoints, and how to and why would you want to incorporate the API spec into your tests. But that's going to be the last part of our little webinar. So without dragging this out too much, let's start. So the benefits of Playwright. Like, first of all, I want to say that over the years when I worked, I've seen various approaches to writing API tests. Well, obviously the easiest way is to start off with Postman, which is a nice tool if you just want to test a few endpoints, send a few simple requests. But it tends to get a bit difficult to maintain once your API grows and once your test framework grows. The maintenance at one point just sort of overflows, and it's a bigger task to maintain those tests than to actually write new ones. And it's been the case for many Postman frameworks that I've seen over the years. So naturally, I tried to choose a better solution, and I dabbled a bit in writing API tests using Java and rest assured and C# plus rest sharp, which are very similar approaches because the languages are proven, the plugins and the libraries, rest assured and rest sharp, are both proven. But then again, you need to install those libraries. This is a dependency on an external source of code, and everything, all those things sort of disappear when you use Playwright with TypeScript, because with Playwright, everything is basically built in. So it's very easy to set up. You really don't need any external libraries, as you'll see in a few moments. But at the same time, unlike Postman and like writing tests in Java or C#, it's very versatile. If you want to build your tests using some advanced, complicated processes, it's very easy to do because you could basically write the process down in your test cases, in your test scenarios, and then go through it, sort of add code to your steps, and you'll see how to do this in this webinar. And since it's versatile, since it's easy to set up, it's also very flexible. It's very easy to expand and maintain. And yeah, now for now you're just hearing about this, but you'll see this in the demonstration part, hopefully. Right, so these are the benefits. Right, move on. So the setup, it's exactly the same as, well, nearly exactly the same as in the previous webinar when Marta showed you how to set it up for front-end tests. Basically, you need Visual Studio Code or any other IDE, but all Visual Studio Code is the easiest to use. You just install Playwright tests for VS Code. Just find this extension and install it. Run npm init playwright creators, and you're good to go. When I front-end tests, you needed to install browsers because obviously you need to run your tests somewhere. Well, today we're going to be doing API tests, so there's no need to install browsers. So when it asks you for installing browsers, you can safely choose no, and everything's going to work fine. So that's basically it. If you want some further explanation about how to set up Playwright, here's a link to the previous webinar and where it's explained in more detail. Right, and now we get to the fun part, which is writing the code. That went on quickly, hasn't it? Right, so for the purpose of this webinar, I've written an API. It's a very simple API, sort of a library app. I've used minimal API to do it. Now, if you want to have if you want to play around with this with API tests, well, it's up to you whether you write your own API and test it, or there are APIs on the internet that are sort of example APIs that are free to use. But I just couldn't find anything that suited the needs for this webinar, suited what I wanted to demonstrate for this webinar. So I chose to write my own using minimal API. It's a very simple sort of library app, mock library app, so that you can list books, you can get a book by its ID, updates a book using a put request, remove it, and obviously add a book. So if, at the moment, if you do try out using Swagger, of course, and list books, we execute a test, and it has currently one book, which is Zero, which I highly recommend. I've been reading this lately, and it's a great book, a classic of science fiction novels. But I digress here. So the API, as you can see, is running, and now we're going to write some tests for it. Now, I'll take the liberty of writing some tests previously, but we're going to start from scratch, and we're going to write a GET request. Now, to do this, right, let's start from the very basics. This is our config file, which I'll dive into. Well, we can dive into it now. This is like the simplest version of it, and I just want to explain a few things before I dive in any deeper. We have a global setup file here, which sets up some things that I'll talk about. This is for the spec, so we don't need to dive into it right now. But we also inform Playwright that our tests are in the test directory, which is here, as you can see. For now, since this is a very simple API, we can run those tests parallel, but since we have very few tests and, well, I've written this API, it's not very advanced, and I'm not sure if it's going to work well with multiple requests. So just sort of for safety and so that I don't have to figure out what went wrong during this webinar, I'll just use one worker that's not going to work in parallel. Right, so as I said, we have our tests in our test directory. This is something we're going to use for demonstrating the structure of a framework, but for now, I want to write a very simple GET request just to show you how to write your first request for an API. We're going to call this test file library initial test, and we have, as with any other Playwright test file, we have to add this spec part so that it knows this is a test spec. And yeah, well, we have our test file. We obviously don't have any tests here. So we'll start off by importing some things. Playwright, we obviously want to import tests because yes, we are going to write tests. And we're going to import also something called expect. Now this is important because it is for assertions, same as with front-end tests. And we are importing this from at Playwright test. So we have this, and we will also need, well, since we are writing API tests, we are going to also send requests. So we need our request sort of fixture. Request from HTTP. That's enough. It's automatically, it did this automatically So the suggestion for HTTP. Right. First, we'll describe our test set using this test describe handle. And we're going to say it's going to be library initial. Sorry for the typing errors. Tests. Yep. Like this. Okay. Okay, am I missing something here? Oh, obviously, I'm missing this. Okay. I just want to make sure that everything is as it should be. Expression expected. This is unexpected. Right. Oh yes, I think I have. No, that's gone. Right, I'll have a look at this in a moment. Sorry about that. It's a bit odd because shouldn't be underlying this, but okay. We'll add our first test. We're gonna do a simple GET request. Now, as I said, this GET request returns the book we have in our library, and we are going to basically do this. We're going to send a GET request to this URL. Yeah, the API is running locally, so this is going to be the URL which we'll use. So we are going to first describe our, well, say what our test is going to be doing. So get books list. Well, as everything in Playwright, this works asynchronously, and we need to pass the request so that it knows it's going to be an API test, a test with API requests. Right on. Oh, sorry. Like this. Oh, yes, I now know why this went wrong, because I've made some small mistake here. And yeah, I don't need this. That now it's perfect. Right, so let's start with this. And it's going to obviously need to be closed at the end. And this is the space where we will write our test. So first of all, we need to have the URL. Now this is like the simplest way of writing this. Everything's going to be in one test, in one. Everything's going to be in one file. And later on, with this one, I will show you how to separate this to make your tests more readable. But for now, for the sake of demonstration, let's just do this everything in one file so that you see exactly what is happening. Local. I'll tell you what. Just to make sure everything is fine, let's copy this request URL from here. So don't make any silly typing error and spend the best part of the webinars looking at what went wrong. And right, so we're going to send a request to our URL. We have the request passed here. So we are going to receive a response, obviously. So let's have our response variable here. And since this is asynchronous, we will need to await for our request to happen before we get a response, obviously. And requests, basically, the way you do this, the way you launch a request using Playwright, you just do request.get. It shows you want a GET request, and the URL, which we already have defined in line 6. So, right. And obviously, when we get a response, we will get a response status. In this case, it will be, where is this? It's going to be a 200. And so we want to have this response status. So to assign this response status to a variable, so then after everything, you can check this using some assertions, for example. Just do it like this. Let's have a variable called response status. And yes, we have to use the await statement because we have to wait for our response to be returned from our API. So await response. And the easy bit is that you just do status and convert this to string because I will want to display this in the console. And well, obviously, as you can see here, there's going to be some response body here. So I think we should also have this assigned to a variable. And let response body wait response is very similar to getting response status. So we have response body response status. And as I said, I would like this to be displayed in the console of our test. So yeah, console.log. We'll get to the assertions in a moment. So we will display in one line the response status. And in the other line, we'll display the response body. So our two variables. I think this should be quite clear. Okay, we are for now not going to write any assertions, but yeah, I'm using this very handy UI for Playwright test. Basically, the way you launch Playwright. If I didn't use, hang on, sorry, is something went weird with the terminal. Always has to happen when you're doing a webinar. If I didn't use UI, it would just launch all our tests. But for now, I just want to launch this one, and the UI is a very handy tool that shows up here. This is our initial test. This is our Git books list. So if I run it, now if you've been to the previous webinar, obviously there would be a, for UI test, there would be a window showing you what's happening in the UI, but well, we don't have a UI here, we just have the API. So we have to look at the console. So yeah, request went well because we have a response status of 200, and here is our response body. The book name is Dune, it's science fiction, so just short description of what the book consists of. Now, well, I said in the agenda that we are going to handle responses. Well, we got our responses, we have them assigned to variables, so now we should handle them. And we shall handle them with our assertions. So that this is the, here we use this expect that I imported from Playwright test. So we expect that our response, response status is going to be, okay, I've added too many of those, is going to be 200. And I expect our response body to contain, well, let's convert this to string to make sure that we are verifying this as a string. Sorry, to contain, yep, oh, Dune, because that's the book we are having. So if I launch this test again, this should pass. Now, if, for example, something goes wrong and there's a wrong status, or we are expecting something that does not exist here, like, for example, we want to do Dune 2, we're looking for the second part of Dune, which we don't have yet in our library, and I launch the test again, well, it's going to fail. And here we will be able to see what exactly went wrong, that, well, it was expecting the string, it got this received string, the thing we expected isn't here. We can also see where exactly has this error occurred on what line. So yeah, this is, well, this shows that the assertions work. But now, this is a bit cumbersome because we are just, obviously we have just one book, one set of data in our response. That's the easy way to do it. But for example, if you want to verify this on a per field basis, because, well, our response, let me just show it to you again. Well, it has the ID of the book, the name, and we actually would like to verify the name, not just if the string contains Dune, but if the name is Dune. So how to do this? And this is where really, sorry, this is my API, and this is where really Playwright with TypeScript is extremely easy. Because the JSON, well, we can convert automatically this response to JSON. We don't need any external libraries. This is all built in. So just do let response let's call this response JSON, because we are not, here we handled this as a string, but we are now going to handle this as a JSON file. And yeah, wait, response.json. So now we have this in our variable, we have the JSON we have for the response. And now let's write assertions for specific fields. So let's expect, yeah, expect now, yeah, let's await response JSON. And now, since we are using the first element, well, this is obviously the first element. There will, if we added more books, there will be more, but we want to access the first element. So we have to do this like this. Well, first element means it starts from 0, so we are accessing the first element on the list, so element 0. A bit confusing, but you'll get it eventually. And we want its name, because that's how it works here. It has name, so we are just basically using the name of the field, which is names. Sorry for confusion. And we expect this to be June. So we also can check other fields. So let's in the same style, let's expect response JSON first element to be genre, to be SF science fiction, obviously. So now it's going to check if the name of the book is Dune and genre is science fiction by using fields from the JSON file it receives in the response. So let's launch this test, see if it passes. Yeah, it passed. Have our little console here, but yeah, I mean, if it passes, it doesn't really show you anything in the console. We can have here that there are, well, 2 assertions, and the previous one and the previous ones we also had here, so you can just sort of view things from this specific step in your console. But yeah, this is going to be more useful when you have more steps and more tests. So this sort of shows you how to get a response from your API and how to handle it. Obviously, well, this is just for a very simple request from a very simple API. But if you have, for example, a large set, if you receive a large set of data, you can do a loop and iterate over various elements of this response. For example, you could have a for loop and replace this with a variable and then increment this variable over how many elements do you receive. So this shows you the GET request. Now, obviously, the other most popular form of request is to send a POST request. So we're going to write a new test called post a book. Yep, it's also going to be asynchronous. This like starts the same way as the GET one. So we're going to write it in the same exact way. Oh, sorry, not like this. Yep. Okay. Well, the URL is going to be a bit different for this one because in our API, we have just this add book endpoint. So yeah, we can copy this and modify it. Okay. So now, well, obviously, if we want to send a post request, we probably need a body. Not always, but usually we need a body. So we'll have a variable called body. And now, well, we could create this body on the fly, but if you're doing your tests, you sort of want, if you have request bodies for various tests, you may want to have them in a separate JSON file. And I have this here prepared in advance. So this is a very simple JSON file. Well, it's the second part of Dune. we have this element called the book, and this is the book I wish to send to my API. So it has ID of 2. The name is Dune Messiah because that's the second part of Dune. Genre is the same. The description is basically the same because, well, it's a similar book. And yeah, so if you were writing this using C# or Java, you would have to deserialize your JSON file and sort of put it in your request. Now with Playwright and TypeScript, it's a lot easier because all you have to do, well, I have this JSON file in my test data folder in tests, so I can just import it straight away. And I can import not only, not just the file, but the element of in the file. So let's import book, which is this thingy here. Let's import book from, and we give it the path to our book.json file. So double dots, which means we are in our solution folder. We want to access the tests folder. Is very convenient because it suggests you that you want to go here, and well, we have either a file or the test data folder, which is where we want to go. And there is, well, the book.json file. So at this point, I don't really need to handle anything. So let the body equal book. So this is this thing I imported here, which is this element. So as you see, it's very easy. I did not need to install any external libraries or handle this in any way, just straight up imported in it from the JSON file. And in a moment, I'll show how we can sort of modify the contents of that JSON file. But for now, let's just send a simple post request. So let our response be, again, we have to await for a request because we're doing this asynchronously. When you write your either frontend or API test, there will come a moment where you forget the await part and you will have a lot of debugging to do. So best to have a habit to make sure that you have your awaits everywhere, because you have to remember you're writing this in an asynchronous tool. So yeah, first part is the same. We just basically change the get request to post request. Sure. Put the URL here. Now we want to add this body. So we add it like this. We have data, and now our body, and our body is here, the body variable. This basically should work. And of course, we want this to have, we want to verify if this request went through correctly. So we'll check the response status here. Once it's a very simple API, it just will show you a 201 status if everything goes according to plan. Await response status string. So basically the same as before. We assign this to a variable, and basically, so to save time, I'm just going to copy this from here. We're going to display our response status in the console. And well, we write straight away. We will write an assertion. So I expect this to be a 201, which is the status for created. And let's launch our post a book test. Right, I'm just going to make sure that I've saved it. Yep, post a book. Yeah, response status 201. And well, we can check in Swagger. We can do another get request. We have 2 books now. The second one is the one we've just added, which is great. It means everything works. But now, and this is something I want to tell you about a bit later on, about process-focused API tests, because right now this test, checks the single post endpoint. Now I think this might be duplicating any unit test you may have in your project. So what I suggest is to focus more on your processes. So for example, if you want to add a book, you obviously would want to know if the book actually is displayed when you do a get book. So now we shall automate this very simple process, and in the test we shall treat this not as a single endpoint, but as a single process of posting a book. So now basically we shall do the same thing as before. We shall check this using get books. So now we can just copy paste this from here, and again response body is going to be the same. It is worth checking the status. So response status. Oh yeah, I know what I forgot to do. I forgot to actually send the get request. Sorry. Yeah, ignore that for now. Right. Sorry about that. Right. We shall assign a get request to our response now. So now our response is going to be whatever we get from our get request, obviously. And same goes for our response status. I don't need to declare this variable again because I've declared it before. And now our response body. Yeah, just as a failsafe, we can also display them in, oh, I didn't declare the response body before. So yeah, this obviously needs to be declared. As a failsafe, we'll display them in the console. You basically don't need to do, displaying in the console, tests unless you want to do some, debugging, go through everything. But yeah, it helps. But it's not necessary. And yeah, we can expect the status to be 200. And basically copy the assertions from here. And we can also do an assertion like this, and we can check that the second book. Yeah. Oh, first, obviously, we need to do a JSON for the response. If the second book, the second element of our list, is called Dune Messiah, I should like this. Okay, so save this. Let's launch our test. Oh, it's crashed. It's a 500. Oh, and yes, and it's a 500th because I didn't write this API very well, and it's crashed because I'm sending another book with the same ID. Sorry about that, but this is very easy because we'll just change this ID to 3, and yeah, once I send this again, it should work, and at least should not throw a 500. Yes, it went well, and our second book is going to be Dune Messiah. Obviously, the third one, because it sends a it posts a book first, and during this test, it's also Dune Messiah. But okay, this library has 2 books of um, of the same books. So yeah, that's not a problem in the library now, isn't it? So yeah, we checked if the second name is Dune Messiah. Our test passed, and this means we can now send get requests. We can now send post requests. Now, sorry, let me just get back here to our test. Now, if you want to send a put request, a delete request, it's basically the same thing. I don't want to dive too much into this because it's like I know you can figure out it in yourself, because instead of post, you would just write put or patch or delete, and it would just go the same thing. That's the same way you would add a body in the same way you add it in a post request. You add it in for a put request or patch request would be exactly the same. You would use data and body, and you could do body from this variable. Now, okay, so we have some tests written. Now, obviously, when you do your tests, sometimes you have more than one environment. Now, here I only have local host. I run this locally, but maybe if I would do this more properly, and I would have a big project for writing an API for a library, I would probably have some external environments. Now, it would be very annoying to have to keep changing the names here, like change localhost to QA environments or whatever it would be called. So I recommend using something called .NET Env. Now, the way this works, this is basically something that you have separate environment files for your environments, and you can take the variables from those files based on what environment you need. So the way you do this, you do npm install.env. That's the command you would use. I've used this before, so I'm not going to install this again because we don't have time for this. But it's very straightforward. You just launch this and it's installed. Now, sorry, I want to say this. Now, in our config file, now let's have a look at it like this. So this will give us an env folder, and we have here our env local file. So this thing here is the name. I'll call it local, could call it localhost. If I wanted to launch this on a dev environment, I would call it dev or QA for QA environment. Now I use the base app URL here, and I have the port here, which is everything is basically taken straight from the API. So now if I want to launch my tests uh, on the local host environment, I just use this. I set the env to be local, and that's going to be it. If I wanted to run them on a dev environment, I would do this like this. Well, I don't have a dev environment, so this is just for the purpose of the demonstration. And well, those variables, you can access them. I've accessed them in the config here. And yeah, it's like this. The base URL is the local host. It has the port. You have the spec path. I'll get to that in the end. And we export those variables, and they can be used anywhere in our code. And now, where would you want to use them? Now, the way we look here in our tests, well, everything is in one place, which is good for demonstrating because you can see step by step how it works. But if you would want to maintain those tests, this would be very tiresome because, well, you would have to change. Well, you look at it and you don't really see what's happening. There's some console logs, there's some creation of requests, there's some handling of the body. So this is where this comes to play. This is structure for our tests. This basically does the same thing. Let's have a look at the simplest one, get books. So here I've created separate files for steps and for assertions. So this steps file has a step called get books, and if you go inside it, this is basically this sends a get request to the books endpoint. I'll get to that in a moment. And that's basically it. You don't really need to do any request creation. Well, I've moved creation with request requests file, which I keep here in requests. We have folders for steps for requests. So, but the way this idea works is that, well, here we have just the test steps. So it's very easy to see, well, we have a step to get books, and we then assert that the response has the correct status. So when you look at this test, you basically immediately know what's happening here. You have a test that gets books. Now, obviously, for a simple test like this, it's not a huge issue if there are to see what's happening. But if you would have a longer test, it would obviously be more challenging without this structure. Now here, one step is one line. So in steps, we create a get request, and in request, we actually do what is needed to send a get request. So we find an element, we send a get request here to our base URL, port, and path. How to find a path, that's going to be with the going to be in the part about the spec, and send the response when we display the response there. So this works exactly the same. So if we again launch our tests, our library tests, these are the ones of structure. We do get books. It works the same, but it's much easier to read. I've also moved the assertions to a separate category here. And this is where you can handle your responses without having to write like this, use those variables, etc. No, you just have a response have a method a function, sorry, that checks the response status. If it's this, that's exactly what it will do. Now, as you saw before, I obviously had a little issue with that 500 error when I sent a book with the same ID. Now, obviously, I should have done this. I should have handled this from in my API, but well, I didn't, and this could be a reason for a flaky test. So let's have a look at the second test here, which is post book from JSON. Same thing, takes the same JSON, but I'll show you how to handle things, how to sort of create a request on the fly. So we have postbook from JSON, we have our path, which is that book, we have our body, which is books, imported in exactly the same way as before, just in this very convenient steps file. Now, here, as I said, we don't really need to deserialize anything. You just take body, which is our book, .id, which is this. And I've done a little function in our my helpers file, and my helpers file is a file where I keep various functions that are very useful, but they're sort of not assigned to a specific part of the API. It's just like this generating random numbers, random strings, random booleans, whatever. So generate a random number between 1 and 99. And if I do this, it's gonna change this ID, which is free now, and it's going to assign a random number to it. So let's have a go at it, and let's put in the third part of Frank Herbert's series, so Children of Dune. Yep, save this, and let's launch this postbook from JSON, and let's have a short look at it. It's basically the same as before. So we post a book from the JSON, we assert that the response is 201. We then, as I said, we try to test the process. We then do get books, and we assert that the response status is 200, and we assert that the content is book.name, which means this book, this name, because here, because here I've also imported this JSON file, and that this description is the same as in the JSON file. Okay, so let's launch postbook from JSON. And yes, we have a look at the console. The random number turned out to be 9. This is our book, Children of Dune. And yeah, the test passed, so all the assertions passed. So yeah, it works as it should. Now, before I move on to the third test, I also want to show you a bit about reporting. Again, if you've written tests using C# and Rest Sharp, or if you've written tests using Java and Rest Assured, you probably have installed some reporting tool in order to generate your reports after a finished test. Well, you really don't have to do this in Playwright because, as many things in Playwright, it has a built-in reporting tool. Sorry. So the way we do this, well, we want to launch all our tests. Some of them will fail because, yeah, that's how it happens. And we're going to use this command, npx playwright test. This is going to launch all our tests in the console without the UI. And we'll do a reporter, and you can do various things. You can sort of configure it in various ways. If you Google API reporter, you can sort of change the format of the reporter. For now, we're going to use HTML. So let's start this. Yeah, this went up 500. Some tests have failed because the API ain't that great. But now, as you can see, it's generated a report. It opens it, and you can see your test. You can see what went wrong here. So it's actually a good thing that it failed because I can show you what detail you can see in the report. You can see where it is. Basically, this is the same level of detail as you would see in your UI, in your Playwright UI, but it's in the form of a convenience. Well, in this case, HTML report, but you can also use this for other formats. So yeah, that's how it is. And if you have a look at this, well, you can see that's serving HTML report at localhost. If you close it, that's not a big issue because it will also be in Playwright report here. This is the HTML. Obviously, this is an HTML file, but if you would open this in the browser, you would see that exact report. So this generate report is automatically saved to your Playwright report folder. Right, so we've covered quite a lot of material, and we still haven't run out of time. So this means I can tell you a bit about, well, mentioned this before, about basing this tests on the spec. This is something I'm doing in my own project. So now, if we have a look at our API, this always has a spec, and the spec can be downloaded as a JSON file. So it's well, it's not very easy to read if you are a human being, but if you're Playwright, it is easier to read for Playwright. So now, as with front-end tests, we have before or and after each. So we require .nm. This is our environment file. And here is a method I've written, says download spec. This is a simple method that sends a GET request to this exact endpoint with that I've just shown you to download swagger.json. Now, this varies obviously project to project. Some of them, in some projects, you can easily download the spec like this, and some you don't. Well, so it's up to you, and maybe somehow you can access the spec in a different way. But hey, I've written this API, so so I know I can access the spec here. So right, moving back here, and this basically downloads it and saves it to a file, and the file is called OpenAPI spec, and this is exactly the same thing that you see here. Now, I have said before, and I'll repeat again, this is a JSON file, and you've seen before that Playwright is very, very easy to use with JSON files. So now this gives us some possibilities, because we can write code that sort of analyzes this JSON file and does some fun things, like, for example, here, this is taking this a bit extreme, and this uses the spec to automatically generate the body for your response. So I've written this method here that I want to generate a book, and I want this to have a description of, let's say, test description. But for now, let's have a look at the generation process. So we pass the description value here. So we know that there's going to be a description that there's going to be, we are going to use this description value that I passed here. I want a random ID, and I'm going to push this to a table called define body properties, because this is going to be a body property for our request. And I set auto generation to true. I did this as a failsafe so that I don't automatically generate things when I don't want them to be automatically generated. And I'm going to create a body for it. Now, you will also see that I am just sending here add book. I'm not sending the full path here. This is because I've also used the spec, this create body method, to do another thing called find endpoints. And this is basically a method I'm not going to dive into too much detail here, but because it took a while to write and it still needs some refactoring, that analyzes the spec file. So where's the spec file? Yeah, here. And it looks for endpoints, their tags, so that you can see here that you have some parameters. It analyzes their schemas. So basically you can display, well, you can access everything in the spec. You can find the endpoint paths, and then you can access them by just part of the path, like I am doing in my create body method, which I just lost here. Oh yeah. So yeah, maybe this will be easier to see. Sorry, I got a bit mixed up. Yeah, so I'm just saying add book. I don't need the full path. And I'm sending those parameters. And I'm doing a post request to just add book. The base URL is going to be taken from this environment file that we launched in the config. And we're going to use a post request to send this book. So let's see how it works. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I'm going to launch our trusty UI for this one again. Yeah, library test. Postbook by automatically generating this. Oh, yes, and it failed. Sorry, I think this might be some issue with the API. Yeah, probably, as I said, the API is not exactly perfect. Yeah, it's generated a new book here at the end. This ID, well, the random number turned out to be 5. Name is an automatically generated string, and it knows that it should have generated a string because in the spec, if we have a look here, and the request body in the schema, we have parameters like name, which is a string, or general is a string. So it looks for those keywords. So this huge create body method looks for those keywords. If it's a string, it's going to generate a string. If it's a number, it's going to generate a number. It's all going to do this automatically. So as you can see, it created automatically a body for this request, and it used what we defined, and it also, well, we defined the ID, we defined the description, and what we didn't define was automatically generated. Now this is a bit dangerous because, well, you don't really have control what it automatically generates, but this was sort of an exercise to show you how far you can go. Now, I would not use automatically generated tests, but for example, if I wanted a test that sort of checks a lot of data and I first needed to generate the data, well, having a lot of JSONs like this just to have some random data, that would be cumbersome, that would be annoying to maintain. And then I could just do something like this, generate those requests on the fly automatically and send them to our API. And then just, for example, if I tested pagination, I would need like 20 books. For this, I could just sort of automatically generate requests for 20 books with completely random data, and then check pagination using some more robust code. So as I said, it's not an ideal thing to do, but it has its uses. So I'm not saying that this is the way you should do it, that you should automatically generate things in your API. I'm not saying you shouldn't. And this is just something, a demonstration of how far you can go with Playwright with its capabilities to analyze JSON files. Now, you may also tone things down a little bit. For example, if you would download the spec at the beginning of each test run, you could compare the spec you've downloaded in previous test run. You could sort of highlight the differences and show them in. So then when you, for example, launch your tests on a new version of the API, it will show you where the spec has differed, so what tests may be failing and why. So that this is why I think that it is worth considering downloading the spec in your tests and analyzing it at least to some extent. Plus, for example, here I have my API, and yeah, let's show Swagger again. Sorry. Oh yeah, there it is. I have here lists books, and if I want to do a get request here, I showed you before the find endpoints method function. Sorry, I keep saying methods because I get used to this during my Java days. Sorry about that. So I have lists books, but I don't really need to do the whole path here, because here I can do get books. I can just say books. So if the whole path changes, it's still going to hit the correct endpoint. For example, if add books change, if list books changes to book lists, or for example, or something like that, the test will still work. We can actually demonstrate this. For example, here, where's my API? I'm going to need to stop this. Right, and we have lists books, and we'll change this to lists of books. For example, this says change for the sake of change, but this is also to demonstrate how this works. Yeah, launch API again. Hope it launches. This has cleared our previous books because the database is not permanent here. As I said, this is a very simple API for just demonstration purposes. Now, if we enter Swagger, we see that, yeah, the path has changed. So our previous test will fail because those initial ones that we've written will fail because, well, they are written with the full path. But here, the structured ones, as I said, get books just finds the path using books. It's not the full path. As you can see, find endpoint by tag or path, and the endpoint identifier is this /books. So let's launch this test again. Oh, it crashed 404. This is interesting. Oh yeah, I just love it how it tends to happen like this. Ah, okay. I can see where I made the mistake, because right. I did not stop this because it did not download this, because the way Playwright test works, player config has global setup has this method called download spec. Now, if you launch Playwright test, it will launch this at the beginning. But if I used the previous launch of Playwright tests of this UI, and it didn't launch this method, because when I press enter now, it's going to do this download spec method, and it's going to configure everything. But when I just launch a test, it doesn't do this again, so it doesn't have to download the spec for each separate test. So now it should work. Yes, obviously. So yeah, as you can see, it worked. So it still accessed the book as endpoint, and that the path changed wasn't really a problem because it downloaded the spec. So sorry about the first run, where I forgot to download the spec. So that's my fault. yeah, so if you can launch this multiple times, it's still going to work. So yeah, this can be so you can use finding end, you can use this to, like you see here, find endpoints to make more robust. This also comes with its set of risks. So as I said, it's not something I'm showing you to tell you, yeah, this is exactly how you want to do your tests. It's something I'm showing you that you can use. You might have some very good uses for it. It might help you. It might also cause you some problems if you use it with too much liberty. But it's all a demonstration of how powerful of a tool Playwright can be. And as I said, the best thing about it, you don't really need any external libraries. You just need Playwright, and that's basically it. Well, you need .env for those environments. That's the only thing I had to install as an external tool, but that's basically it. Right. So I've shown you the automated generation. I've talked about the benefits and the risks. So yeah, that's basically, I think, it. Sandra, have I forgotten anything?
I forgot to unmute. I don't know, sir.
I think,
Have you
yeah, the only
forgotten
thing
it?
I think I forgot the questions part. So if there are any questions,
Mm-hmm.
if anyone wants to write them in the chat, if they can access the voice chat, then I'm all ears. And
Oh,
if
the
not,
voice chat might take us a
okay.
little while. I don't know how to use that on this platform,
Okay,
but
Marco is
yeah.
writing some questions. Yeah,
Can you
so
see
let's
the
read them aloud.
questions
Yes,
he's
I can see
posted?
the chat. Yes, I can
Okay.
see the chat. Hello, Piotr. What would be the best way to automate post requests without saving the data on the database? For example, I want to test registration, but I don't want to fill the database with new users after each run. Thank you. Well, that's quite a challenge because, well, if you want to post a request and not fill the database, well, if you do a successful request, it obviously will fill the database. However, all depends where you're testing. If you're testing this on an, for example, production environment, then I would not recommend doing a successful post request. Basically, I don't really recommend launching automated tests on production environment. But if you really have to, if the client really requires it, I would refrain from doing successful requests in this example. For example, here you could test that if sending a wrong post request so that the user is not created. And definitely, I don't think we can go around this in an environment that has a database attached. However, you can do something with mocks. You can mock your endpoints so that, well, no database is connected. There are tools for mocking an API. And as you may remember, I mentioned before that there are some free APIs to try out on the web, like dummy.json, for example. This uses API mocking, and for example, it returns to one that your data has been created, but it doesn't really create anything. So mocking your endpoints is the only way I can see this working. So I hope this answer your question, and if not, please write in the chat. What can I elaborate more?
And I'm back with you until we see if we have any more questions. Thank you, Marco, for the question.
Yeah, thanks. And if anyone has any more questions, please feel free to write them.
Going once, going twice.
Yeah, I'm just
Ah,
gonna
well,
answer a question. I just
yeah.
thought about one more thing. That obviously the simplest way to do it without any mocking, to answer Marco's question again, would be to sort of create data and remove the user after the test run. Now you would have to be very careful. I'm not sure you can do mocking in Playwright because you would have to. Well, mocking is done usually on a separate with a separate tool. Personally, I have not done any uh, mocking, but I think you can do mock APIs, and Playwright has some documentation for this. I'll post the link in the chat because it is there. So I need to join the chat. Okay, I need to.
Do you have the link
Right.
handy? Can you send it to me on
Yeah,
Teams
yeah.
and I'll just put it here?
Yeah.
Maybe it's easier.
I think that's going to be. Yeah. Sorry, I just need to join YouTube for from. We're having trouble connecting YouTube account. Okay, I'll just display those on the
Just
screen. Just a moment. Yeah, here's documentation for mocking API requests. So you can do mocks here, and that's the way I would suggest. But personally, I haven't yet done this, and this might be a good topic for part three of the webinar. I'll also send a link to Sandra so she
thank
can
you.
post this on the YouTube chat. So I haven't yet tried this because in my project I need to do mostly end-to-end tests for the API. So I need to check if the data has been actually created in the database. So uh, I had no use for this, but definitely it says you can do this, and you can do this in Playwright, which is another great feature of this. So I hope you find use of this, Marco. And yeah, I'm going to have to dive into this and maybe do a part three of this webinar series.
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah, and as I said, if mocking is not an option, you can always try to delete the data after you've done it, but this comes with a set of risks that, for example, delete request might fail. So yeah, and the data won't be deleted. So yeah, mocking might be an option for production-based environments. Okay, so waiting for more
Okay.
questions for a while.
I don't think we have any more questions because people kind of knew we were taking questions and there was nothing else that came up. Carol is saying thank you and thank you for
Yeah,
joining. Marco, thank you for joining and everybody who was here with
yeah.
us
Thanks for
today. And
listening.
especially thank you, Piotr, for taking the day to teach us something new and for creating the whole environment for it. It was lovely hearing from you. If you have any thoughts in the closing, now's the time because we're going to end the live stream.
Yeah, I'm just thankful for everyone that came to listen. Hope I didn't bore you. So yeah, hope people have learned some new things, and yeah, I encourage everyone to dabble around with Playwright API, both for API testing and for UI testing. Because personally, I believe that's sort of a. I know that's it's been said about many tools that they are the future of testing and they will replace Selenium and C# plus RestShop or Java plus RestAssured. And up until now, I usually was very skeptical about those tools. With Playwright, it's been so fun to use on my current project that I'm actually inclined to believe that this might be the thing that's gonna slowly replace the tools we use currently.
So then we most definitely have to do another webinar on this. See the updates in a few months.
Yeah, it's a large topic. There are thanks for Marco for suggesting an idea. So maybe sometime I'll take a look at those mocks and show you how to do this for mocking APIs.
Amazing. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it was great. Great seeing you. Thank you once again, Piotr and everybody. And we will see you next time.
Yeah, thanks very much, everyone.
Goodbye.
Yeah, goodbye.